Hello. Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Governance and Audit Committee. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube. I believe that we have two people joining online, Councillor Zuhaireddin and Mr. Bunting from
Yes, Chair.
KPMG.
Yes, Chair. Councillor Zaharuddin present online.
Thank you. There's no Adam Bunting. I guess he'll be joining us later. Great. Okay, let's move to item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies. So, Emma, are there any apologies? Oh, somebody's... Okay. So we're just waiting to see who's in the lobby. Okay. All right. If members just could be quiet for a couple of ticks while we sort out who we have in the meeting. Let Emma do her work.
Yeah, he's in now. Yeah, he's in.
Okay, and we've been joined by Mr. Bunting from KPMG. Great. Okay, let's go back to item 1, apologies. Any apologies?
Yes, we have Councillor Karen. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. I need to ask if there are any declarations of interest. Please state them and the nature of your interest if you have any.
There were none pre the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Clark. Item 3, the minutes. I'd ask if members have any corrections, points of accuracy on the minutes. Otherwise, I'm going to propose that they're adopted as correct record. I'd just like to point out that at our last meeting, there was a recommendation for the new contract standing orders to go to full council. They did, and they were approved unanimously. And I just wish to thank members of this committee for the good work they did in the preparation for that. Item 4, any urgent items of business? I don't see any. So let's move on to the main items of business. That's item 5. So Anne Moore is going to present a report on the corporate complaints policy and the complaint management system, and bring us up to speed on what's happening there. Anne, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report before the committee this evening is seeking your approval to the revised corporate complaints policy. And we've also set out in the report an update for you on a complaints management system and the implementation approach for the changes to the policy. So for clarity, the policy that's before you, the revised policy, only applies to corporate complaints. And this covers all service complaints. There are separate processes for statutory complaints for adults and children, social care, and for complaints, information governance, GDPR. But this policy before you tonight and the changes is for the corporate complaints. So I'm just going to run through a very brief overview with the key changes, and then I'll hand over to my colleague, Jen Lawson, who's the Head of Service for Corporate Complaints, who can answer any questions on the detail for you all. Thank you. So the key changes, the main one is that the new policy, the revised policy, aligns with the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman new code on handling complaints. It was launched in February this year after significant consultation. Doesn't come into effect immediately, so we're a little bit ahead of the game before it has to be in place, and this will give us an opportunity to make sure it's well embedded. One of the main features of the new revised policy, and it is a requirement in the LGSCO's new code, is that we remove stage 3 for complaints. And so the council moves to a 2-stage complaint. The policy also covers out more clearly what can and can't be considered under the policy and gives some guidance on what would be considered a complex complaint. There's also guidance around how the complaints policy interacts with other policies. So, for example, disciplinary or grievance policies. We also have a policy for addressing unreasonable complainant actions, and that's becoming a standalone policy with this proposal, so it's easier to find and apply. The implementation for the changes to the policy, if agreed this evening, would be on the 27th of this month. So the benefits of the revised policy are that it provides a shorter process with a renewed focus on early resolution, and that's a bonus for the complainant and for the council. More information is provided, so expectations during the process should be improved. The new system that I'll talk about in a moment, it provides better tracking, so we can keep on top of the complaint pathways and make sure they keep within timescales. And there's a great focus on making sure as an authority we learn and take action to support improvement as a result of information we have on complaints. The new process will be communicated on the council's complaints webpage. What the complaint system will do is give greater visibility of escalated complaints for officers within the council, which is vital for learning those lessons of how we move forward. So the intranet guidance will be updated for officers and system training on the new system will be provided. So the complaints management system, this is a general update for you all. This has been being built internally by our digital team. And what the system will allow us to do is manage and process complaints consistently and will allow us to monitor that progress. It will store all the complaint history in one place and it will send automated responses. And tying into what I said earlier, it captures data so that it better supports the reporting and the insights that we hope to gain from this. We're anticipating the implementation for that management system to be January next year. So that was all I was going to cover, and I'll pass over to Jen Lawson, if anybody has any questions.
Okay, are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Havertch, please.
Yes, it's about the system, really. So I guess the system's not coming until January, but you say that the change you're hoping to have in place by September. Is that going to cause any issues at all, or is it just a very straightforward? And also, is the system internal only, or will that be outward facing at all?
I will hand over to Jen to give you the detail, but the system really supports the process. So even if we didn't have the system in place, we can still deliver the complaints process. The system just improves all of that. Right. So no, it won't hinder that, but I don't know if Jen wants to say a few more words on that.
The only thing that I would...
Sorry, Jen, could you just introduce yourself, please? Your full name and your role, please.
Yes, yeah. So good evening, councillors. I'm Jen Lawson and I'm the head of corporate complaints. I can dive in with the answer. I think Anne has answered the question about the dependencies. The system isn't dependent on the changes and vice versa, but they're two sensible things to implement in the sort of in the way that we've set out. To answer the question about, is it an internal system only? It's predominantly, its use is internal. It has an external interface so that complainants can get their complaints directly into the system by completing an online complaint form, which is what they currently do. So that's not a change, and all of the other options we would maintain to make sure that we can accept complaints through a variety of methods.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Robinson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to talk about the agile approach. It's quite risky because you launch something that without testing it. You see it in the real world. Lots of companies launch agile processes and they launch it without testing. So if something goes wrong, have you got anything in place to...
So I'm going to go to Jen to give you more detail, but actually all the way through the process, it's being tested. So I hope that will mitigate some of your concerns around that. But Jen, do you want to provide some more information around the testing?
Yes, so we have already, we're testing as we go along as part of the agile approach. So once different parts of the system are built and different functionalities available, we test it at that point. So we're already testing, and we envisage carrying on testing as new blocks are released, if you like. And we actually expect to have the system ready. The system's likely to be ready earlier than January, because we envisage spending some time testing and then some time training before it actually goes live. And as Anne said, it will be enormously beneficial, but we won't release it until it's right, and there aren't those dependencies, so there wouldn't be a pressure to release this unless it did the job and we were satisfied with the testing.
Yes, thank you. It's just that from my experience as well, people just don't test it, they just launch the software on and then people try it out. So I'm encouraged that will be testing being carried out. So I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
And I'm just wondering whether this committee could request that you come back at a later date with a report on how the testing is going?
Happy to do that, Chair.
Thank you. I have some questions, Jen. So just a bit more sort of background. Why the change the procedures? I can see that they're going to be simplified. But what's driving the change?
So one of the main drivers for doing it now is the good practice released by the LGSCO. So the complaint handling code that they released in February, and whilst it isn't mandatory, there's a very strong expectation that councils would adhere to it in terms of good practice. So that sets out a two-stage process as being the right balance between a swift response and a thorough response. And so that's something that we've brought into our processes to reflect that.
Thank you very much. And then the next question is there is a procedural change and there's a software change that we've been discussing. Is the software a standard package which is used by other local government authorities?
It's not a standard complaints management package. It's a platform that we've used, we already use within the council, and we use for different processes, and we're building the complaint handling element into that. So it's a platform that we already know and we already use in other services, and we're taking advantage of that to build our own in-house system.
Okay, thank you. And so my last question, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot a little bit. So if you're not prepared for this, I perfectly accept that. So could you give an example of a complaint without obviously going into details that would have been handled more efficiently and effectively under the new system versus the old?
Are you talking about, just to check, the system as in the sort of complaint handling system that we're talking about, or the process, or
the process? So trying to illustrate using an example the advantages of this new code of conduct.
So the main advantages are providing that the final response from the council at an earlier stage, at stage 2 rather than stage 3, and sort of shifting some of that focus throughout the process. So so that focus on support for an early resolution rather than it continuing, because what everybody is looking for out of the complaint is for it to be resolved and for people to have the understanding and clarity of what was considered and what the what the council needs to take away and learn from it, and also what the final position is for the person who's complaining.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, perhaps at a later date, once the system is in and working, you could come back to this committee and give us some examples of improvements that have been obtained. So thank you very much. Okay, so we have to take a vote on a recommendation. Recommendation is page 9. Yep, I'm just going to read the recommendation. So that the Governance Audit Committee approves the revised corporate complaints policy and implementation approach, and that the Executive Director, Communities, is authorised to make minor revisions to the corporate complaints policy in consultation with the committee chair. It's customary for me to move these recommendations. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Allen, happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I don't wish to speak. I've had all my questions answered. The seconder, do you wish to speak, Councillor Allen?
No, thank you.
Okay, so I think we've heard everything we need to hear. I'm going to ask for a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. So moving on to item 6, Standards Annual Report. And we asked Sanjay Pressure to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. To begin with, just to emphasise, this is a report purely for noting. It will go on to the next council meeting in November for the same purpose. The standards report is intended to provide a snapshot of how the standards regime has worked or operated within the locality, within Bracknell Forest Council, over a 12-month period, and the 12-month period in question here is the previous financial year, so 2023, April 23 to April 24. I've produced these reports over the last 9 years here at Bracknell Forest Council, and in producing these reports, I normally look at 3 things. I try to identify whether there's been any changes in the standards framework in terms of governance arrangements, whether that's nationally or locally. So that may be that the government has introduced guidance around, for example, members' code of conduct, or how complaints should be dealt with, or it may be around sanctions. That's the first thing. In this instance, the report is light on governance issues simply because there haven't been any developments locally within that 12-month period. Worth noting, in previous years, we've had, for example, changes to the code of conduct, and we've taken that through this committee and to council. But this year, there's nothing that I've reported on in terms of governance arrangements. The second and the third thing I would normally refer to are figures, because what members of the public would want to know is how the code of conduct, and we're talking about the code of conduct is a complaints process. It's a completely different one to the previous item, because this relates purely to the conduct of councillors and co-opted members. So I would report figures in terms of how many complaints we've had over the last 12 months and how they were resolved, and those are set out in the respective tables on pages 41 to 43. And thirdly, I'd look at discernible trends as far as is practicable. Often it's very difficult if you've got a small number of complaints to identify any discernible trends, but there's a few comments that I will make in relation to the data that is presented before you. So in terms of the figures that I've referred to, in terms of the number of complaints in 23-24, if you look at page 41, you'll see there that we had 17 code of conduct complaints last year, none of which were upheld, and 10 of which were resolved informally. You may note the figures. There's a quite considerable jump in the figures in 2022, 23 and 23, 24. The 22, 23 figures, and I would have reported on those last year, the high number was largely due to a couple of complaints which were made against a large number of councillors. So in effect, if we reduce those 2 complaints down to 1 each, that the number of complaints in 22, 23 would have been in single figures. 23, 24, which is what I am reporting on now, again, it's quite a significant number, but that is split between borough council complaints and parish and town council complaints, and I'll go on to refer to that in a moment. So in terms of the figures for 22, 23, the relevant details are set out in Appendix B. So you'll see a breakdown of each of those 17 complaints. You'll see the date of the complaint. You'll see the status of the complainant, whether it was a borough or parish councillor, the grounds of a complaint, and the outcome. I'm not going to go through the detail. I'm sure you've had an opportunity to review those, and if you've got any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those. But in terms of what is included in that data, you'll see that of the 17 complaints, The complainant categorization was, in 4 cases, it was a parish councillor who was complaining. In 2 cases, a borough councillor, 7 cases, a resident, 3 in office, and 1 was anonymous. In terms of the breakdown of those 17 complaints, 11 related to parish and town councillors, and 6 related to borough councillors. And in terms of the types of complaint, it's quite notable that a larger number, 8 out of those 17, related to failure to treat others with respect. So I think that figure does stand out in terms of, you know, what was the main cause of complaints across the board. We've not had any outcomes which resulted in a finding against a councillor. One of the things that we did explore last year in terms of informal resolution, because it is costly to go through an investigation process and particularly also to convene a panel. We did in one particular instance, it was a complaint from a resident against a town councillor. We introduced a mediation process. So we commissioned a mediator to work on that, and that was successful. So that's something that we'll be looking at exploring more in future complaints, where, you know, it would be better to try to see whether that resolution can be reached where it's basically a dispute between 2 parties, rather than going through a full process. Because sometimes when it's just a question of 2 sets of facts, you can have an investigation, you can have a finding, but, you know, if it then goes to a hearing, it's not always the case that there's a clear-cut outcome that can be reached by a panel. So that's all I wanted to say on the report itself. I'll pause there, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions, fellow members? No questions online?
None, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so it's our duty to thank the Borough Solicitor for a very comprehensive report. Yeah, we note the sort of nature of the majority of the complaints about respect. You know, this administration, I think, has been very strong in saying that we intend to abide by and implement the Nolan principles of very high standards in public office. I think that's worth repeating. And on that note, I would like to note this item and take the report as read. Thank you. We're now going to move to item 7. This is the internal audit update. And I'm going to ask Sally, Head of Internal Audit, to present the report.
That one's working. Yes, thank you, Chairman. Sally Hendrick, Head of Audit and Risk Management. This is my internal audit update, which I bring to the committee on a quarterly basis. So this is my first update against the 24-25 internal audit plan that the committee approved in March. So I'd just like to draw your attention to a number of sections within the report. And firstly, starting on page 53, to highlight the progress that we have made and the number of audits that we have delivered so far to date. We are still struggling with our resources internally, and so we have only delivered 11 audits. But just to put that into context, by this time last year, we'd actually only delivered 8, and we have actually just certified another grant today. So that brings us up to 12. But as I said, we are struggling with our resources. So I have 2 vacancies on my team. One is actually covered by a principal auditor at the moment, but the other is vacant. And I now have long-term sickness at apprenticeship level as well. So we are struggling, but I think we're actually making quite good progress, surprisingly, and it is actually better than last year.
Plus we have another 3 audits that we are issuing in the next week. So we are making good progress against the plan. The next thing I wanted to do is draw your attention to page 53, section 3.7 onwards, to those areas where we have identified significant risks when we've carried out our audits, which are the Bracken Walk Youth Facility, the Drug and Alcohol Team, and the Debt Management Property section. So those items are just listed there for your information. There's some detail already provided there. I wasn't intending to go into any more detail on that on the report that I've presented here tonight, but I'm very happy to take any further questions that anyone would like to raise.
So members, any questions? You can ask a question on the topic, on the report.
Yeah.
So please go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, it's actually going back to the resources section that you mentioned. I mean, we've had this mentioned several times now coming along. I'm just wondering, when will this become a real problem, and what will be the issue if we can't get enough audits completed and the like?
Well, in the worst case scenario, if we didn't complete enough audits, if we didn't have the resources, I would be unable to give my annual opinion because I wouldn't have enough audit work to be able to base my opinion on. But we're not in that position. We are progressing the audit plan, and I'm actually quite pleased with how it's going, considering the level of resources that we've got, to be honest. In addition, we are going out to recruit now, so the advert should be going out in the next few days for the principal auditor post. And we have a market premium agreed for that. So hopefully that will be more successful this time around, and we will get more candidates coming through when we put the advert out. So I'm optimistic about that. We do have a very, very good temp at the moment. And we have, as I said, we've got some long-term sickness on the apprentice, but we do have also capacity that we use from Wokingham Internal Audit Service, where we buy in a number of days. And what I have done for 25, whereas usually I would buy 100 days from them, I'm buying 150 because I've got short capacity. So we are taking steps to mitigate the risk. So I think it would be highly unlikely that we would be in the position where there wouldn't be sufficient audit work for me to give an opinion.
Councillor Allen.
I seem to remember we had 2 apprentices, is that right? And so, we're another, a few months on. How far are we from the apprentice becoming qualified? The one that's not on long-term sick.
Oh, they would both be at the point where they're becoming qualified. It's very unfortunate that one of them has gone sick at the very end point. So at the moment, the other apprentice is going forward. She will take her final exam on the 3rd of October, I think, and her endpoint assessment discussion is within days of that. So she's very much at the end of the process. And we've already put steps in place to set out what the way forward is for the apprentices moving forward at the next level up, the next auditor level, and also putting steps in place to identify what further professional training that they can do to encourage them to stay.
Does that reduce the workload somewhat on the rest of the staff who have to look after these apprentices once they become qualified?
Yes, I think it's reducing all the time as they become more experienced. So as they become more experienced, they need less oversight and supervision. And also now, because they are coming towards the end of their apprenticeship, whereas at the moment they have 1 day off a week for studying, they won't have that anymore. So that will automatically increase their availability and the time they have available to carry out audit work, because they won't have that 1 day off a week to study.
Okay, thank you. And the other question was about I noticed that the Bracken Walk Youth Facility, it comes under the memos and reports with critical and major recommendations, but doesn't come under the one above, which is inadequate. But it looks like it's working its way through, towards that. So, what is the issue there?
Sorry, I missed that question. Could you repeat it?
The Bracken Walk Youth Facility.
Yes.
You've marked it as red with advisory report requested by service management with critical and major risk observations raised. But it comes under in your table on page 53. It comes under the memos and reports section rather than being marked as an inadequate audit. So why is that?
That's because when we carried out the review, we agreed before we started it that we wouldn't put an opinion on it. We just wanted to do a sort of position statement and advise them on the issues that were coming forward, because they already were aware that there were significant problems out there. So we just took that route and we went down the sort of advisory route to advise them around the weaknesses that we found, the level of weakness, and what action we thought they could take forward to try and address those things. And they have actually taken it very, very seriously. The issues generally arose because of management issues at the site, and there were gaps in management where there was the manager departed, and then there was some gaps there, an interim cover that then fell through. So they had lots of sort of gaps in management control over a number of months, really, which sort of exacerbated the problem out there. But they had identified for themselves that they got an issue, and they actually requested the audit. They just wanted to, I think, to see just how what the position really was. Yeah. So it was, and we welcome those sorts of audits where people where managers will actually try to get to the bottom of what the problems are. So I think that can be quite helpful and constructive and can add value.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. Any other questions? Okay, I have a question. So members and residents do come into contact with council systems. Where or what is the process for requesting internal audit take a look at processes which may have an impact on revenue or costs?
Well, our requests for audits generally come from assistant directors mainly, or directors, that will ask us to review areas where they have concerns about, or whether they would like to get some indication about whether there are any problems there or everything is working as they're expecting it to. So they generally come from assistant directors and directors requesting audits. If we become aware of issues from our knowledge around what's happening in the organisation, we may also flag up areas that we think potentially we need to look at during the course of the year, following the approval of the plan at the beginning of the year. If there's anything that comes to our attention, we will then discuss it with senior officers to identify if we need to carry out any additional audit work. But we wouldn't get requests for audits from residents, because I don't think that would be appropriate.
No, so this committee here, its job is scrutiny. So we may come across things ourselves or have things reported to us. Is it legitimate for us or members of this committee to request, or I don't know, require audits in certain areas?
I think it would be perfectly acceptable for the committee to ask officers to consider whether an audit should be carried out, or if you had any major concerns, for us to try and take that on board in the plan and try and work around that.
So would the correct process be that where we think an audit should, or where somebody thinks an audit should take place, that we bring that as a minuted item to this committee to discuss it first, or do we just go direct? Councillor Allen.
I know in the past where we saw significant weaknesses happening, we would bring the officer, the assistant director or director involved to a governance and audit meeting to answer questions where they had significant failings from audits and where they were repeatedly failing audits. But I don't think we've ever brought someone in who hasn't been already audited failed, shall we say?
Yeah, I think I'm asking not necessarily to bring people to the committee, but we may have an area of the council that we feel needs some kind of inspection or audit because it may have a significant impact on cost or revenue. And I'm mindful of the the budgetary situation that we're in. I'm just looking. I'm just asking if there is a correct process to increase your workload. I know that you're under considerable pressure.
Thank you, Chairman. I think in the first instance, if there are any situations like that, you would perhaps ask for assurance from the relevant executive director around what your concerns may be, and then consider once you've had their response whether or not you'd wish to see a formal audit undertaken. I think it'd be quite unusual for the committee to require an audit to be done without going through that initial step.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. That's just the answer I was looking for the kind of correct process. Again, we're mindful of the the budgetary situation. I think it's going to be all eyes and hands, just making sure that we're managing resources as best we possibly can. But thank you very much for that answer. That's very clear. Thank you. Okay, if there's no further questions, can't see any, can't hear any online. We're going to note the report and once again thank Sally and her team for the sterling work they're doing. Thank you. Moving on to item 8, and this is the strategic risk update. And once again, it's going to be Head of Internal Audit, Sally Hendrick, to present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. So the risk register comes to the committee on a periodic basis for the committee to sort of review and to identify if they want to flag any particular issues to take back to the corporate management team for consideration. For this iteration, just to make you aware that there is quite a rigorous process for the strategic risk register. It does go to the strategic risk management group on a quarterly basis. So it went to the strategic risk management group in August for review. And that was following quite detailed, rigorous update of the risks with the individual risk owners, which is something we did towards the end of July and around the early part of August. That was done before we took it to the strategic risk management group to look again at the risks with the risk owner, to look at the actions in detail and make sure those were updated before it went to strategic risk management group. And then it was reviewed at strategic risk management group, and following that it went on to the corporate management team for review. And so you're seeing here tonight what has been agreed by the corporate management team. There's a couple of changes that have been made to the format of the risk register, just to draw your attention to that. In particular, what we've added in now is some commentary around what the unmitigated risk score is, which I think is quite helpful from your point of view, because it enables you to see and to be informed by what is happening in the risk environment generally, sort of nationally, locally, in which the council is operating. So that's commentary is very helpful. We've then also added something as a sort of guide around what we're looking to achieve in terms of the risk and the direction of travel we want to move the risk in to bring it down to our tolerance level by adding this arrow to the charts that you will see in the individual charts for each risk from page 65 onwards. And that's just to indicate, as I said, what our risk tolerance is and where we're trying to move to. As you may recall, we are trying to move towards assessing what our risk tolerance is, what the risk level is that we can bear, rather than determining a sort of target risk score of what we would like to have in terms of risk. We need to be realistic and focus on what the risk tolerance is. So as I said, it's been fully updated. It's gone through Strategic Risk Management Group and CMT. It's had detailed update on the actions with the individual risk owners. I wasn't proposing to go through each risk in detail, and it is fair to say that I missed out on a lot of the discussions because I had COVID and was ill during the process of the discussions at Strategic Risk Management Group and CMT. So the Section 151 officer, Stuart McKellar, will have more information and more understanding of the risks than I would, to be honest. But I'm very happy to try and take any questions, or if Stuart is able to respond to them more easily, then that might be appropriate, Stuart.
Okay, questions, please. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Jim. It's just an observation. The local economy resilience graph doesn't show the period blank at the bottom. If you can see, I'm pointing out my screen. So that may need to be updated. Yeah.
My apologies, Chair. That was pointed out at the corporate management team meeting too. Unfortunately, my technology skills were not sufficient to address it for the report. So apologies.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Any more questions? Councillor Allen.
I'm concerned by the increase on significant increase on the impact of pressures on the local health system, which is on page 66. It jumps from sort of 15 to 25, which would put it in the top quartile of the risks. Given that it's most of the local health system isn't much to do with us, how much influence can we have on this?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the impact that it's having specifically is related to the contributions that health provide for some of the social care and education services that we commission. So there are things like continuing healthcare funding, which is contributing to rather Section 117, I think it is. So a range of different areas. And because of the pressures on the health system's finances, they are taking a more hardline approach on their contributions. So for example, we have seen in the current year a reduction of, Gráinne Siggins, the Exec Director of People, was talking this morning about a reduction of more than £1 million for the contributions toward children's social care in this year alone. So that's the reason why the risk has increased, because it has been seen as a risk up till recently. It's now becoming very much a reality. And what we can do about it is we are working with the other East Berkshire local authorities who are also in the Frimley ICB system to together make sure we're having collaborative but robust conversations with our local health colleagues around those issues.
Thank you, Stuart.
Just to follow up on that, just want to double check the scale on the left-hand side of the graph, the 0 to 25, whatever, is that related to the RAG rating? So I'm just surprised that it shows as 25, but when you go to the matrices above on page 64, it puts safety valve up there, but it doesn't put the other the local health in that 25 section.
It's a very good spot, Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Thank you both. Any more questions?
So in that, which case I'll point out that the safety valve on page 73 only goes up to 20, and that is in the top. That shows us 25 on the graphs above. So I think we need to make sure that the graphs on page whatever it was, 64 or whatever, or the tables on page 64 are correlated properly with the detail below.
Yeah, if I can come in briefly, you're absolutely right. We do need to double check that. I think the only change that does need to be made is to move the pressures on the local health system up to 5x5. The safety valve is currently showing 5x4, which I think is correct.
Councillor Havergy.
Thanks. Yeah, just a bit more understanding on those graphs. So we've got the current risks and the target risks over a period of time. I'm assuming the current is where we are now, or where we're looking like we're going to be carrying as normal. The target, is that where we're hoping to get to if we actually manage to implement these mitigations, or is the target where we just like to be safe?
Yeah.
Okay, Sally.
Yes, the targets are, they should be, what we're trying to set out here is the level of risk that we can reasonably accept, rather than the position we are in at the moment where we've got red risks or we've got amber risks, because the level of risk that we are experiencing at the moment is higher than we really can bear. So we need to try and get those risks down. So that's what that is. In the table on page 63, those scores in the table are the current risk scores, so they're where we are at the moment, and the tolerance levels are what we're trying to get the risks down to, where we can feel we're comfortable with accepting that level of risk.
Okay, so does that mean with the mitigations that we've got written in here in place, that's where we're going to hope you get to?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't see any further questions. No questions coming in online. Councillor
Thank you.
Zaharuddin is usually very, very efficient and diligent in going through this report, so that's why I was kind of hesitating, waiting for you to ask a question. But
None at the moment, sir. Thank you.
Just acknowledging your presence and your expertise. Okay, so I recall at a previous meeting that we talked about doing a deep dive, this committee, a meeting, and doing a deep dive into some of the risk areas. And if I recall correctly, it was said that the senior management team wanted to do some deep dives themselves and then come to the committee with their findings. And I think I made a mental note, maybe in the minutes, that it would be September that we would have a presentation, a deep dive. Where are we on this request for a deep dive and senior management team? Stuart, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the focus at the last corporate management team conversation was about making sure we were satisfied with the new presentation which has been brought forward, and making sure that we are satisfied with the wording that sat underneath it. So that's where we had our focus. We didn't focus at that meeting on a particular specific area. That's something that we will come back to in future reviews.
All right. Well, thank you for that. So, but in the light of recent announcements on where we're heading with outturns, I'd like to request that we do have a look at risk 1, financial sustainability, in some detail at our next meeting, and we do that in private, so we can have a thorough understanding, or this committee can have a thorough understanding of the challenges and potential solutions that we have in terms of keeping us on track on budget. I note that there is an additional meeting coming up I can just make sure I get the right date. On the 13th of November, where we're going to look at some new budget setting processes that we need. So I think that would seem like a good time to have a look at financial sustainability as part of our overall budgeting process.
Would I be able to come in, Chairman, on that?
Please.
Yeah, the only thing I would point out is that there is a meeting of the Overview Scrutiny Commission on, I think it's the 9th of November, which will be looking at the Council's in-year budget position and future financial position going ahead based on a review of a report that has gone to the executive or is going to go to the executive in October. So we need to be very clear about what the specific angle you would wish to look at to make sure we're not duplicating work of another committee only the week before.
So does that committee, I presume that committee doesn't get the risk register. That's our bailiwick, so to speak.
So, Chairman, if your request is that we do a specific review around the risk register, that would be fine from my perspective. That's a slightly different angle from what the Overview Scrutiny Commission would look at. So that's fine by me, Chairman.
Yeah, I'm very happy to get the sort of terms of reference for that. Private discussion agreed with the officers, of course. So we don't have any duplication, and we can add value, as well as making sure that we're properly on top of this for our members and residents. So can we note that as an action point, just to agree the sort of terms of reference for what we'll be doing on the 13th as an additional item? So, members of the committee, we have to vote on this one. So I'm going to read the recommendation. So it's on page 61. That the committee reviews the strategic risk register in Appendix 3 and agrees any matters to report to the corporate management team for its consideration. And the reason for the recommendation to ensure the council has identified all its key risks so these can be appropriately managed and mitigated. So as usual, I'm going to propose that. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor, I'm happy to second that, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I don't wish to speak. Councillor Allen, do you wish to speak? In that case, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Okay, so before we conclude, I just had a question to Emma, our clerk, for the evening. Adam Bunting was due to attend. Is he just listening, or does he have a contribution to make?
Just left the meeting.
I'm here.
What is it? There we go.
Hey, Adam, would you like to?
I was just here to attend, to listen, in case anything else that we need to be aware of as part of our audit, to add comment I had to, but there's no comments to make from my end.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Okay, so in that case, I'd like to thank all the officers who've made a contribution this evening. Thank you very much for your reports. Thank you very much for the members, the councillors. Thank you for your observations and corrections. Diligent as usual. And I therefore close the meeting. If you just remain silent while we go offline. Thank you. Okay, we're all good.
Thank you. Bye-bye.